Happy Sabbath. How's everybody doing? Well, while I open up here my notes, if you hear like a squeaky voice or something, the weather's not been nice with me. So it was so pleasant in the beginning of the week, and then all of a sudden, temperature dropped, and my throat just, yeah. So have a little patience with me. Yeah. Also, I'd like to say I'm not a speaker. My dad's a pastor, so there's that pressure. And ever since I was a kid, my dad's like, oh, you could be a pastor, and sometimes he even puts a picture of me when I was a kid, like when I was, I put a bunch of teddy bears and I was like started preaching in my underwear. And ever since he has that picture, like, oh, you do so good, you have so much talent, and I'm like, okay. So I'm not a speaker, but one of the things that I think about a lot is that the church is a place that sometimes we have this weird vision of the church, which is like it's almost like a school where there's a professor and then there's the students that are like inferior in knowledge, and so we kind of see this place as like very sacred in the sense that it's exclusive to those with a lot of knowledge and that went to a course of theology for 4 years and so on. But that's just not the case, right? We know by our own church's history that even our main founders, they were younger than me, in fact, and they did not do theology. And that's the beautiful thing, because God speaks not only to those with high IQ, but they speak to each one of us. And so when I was asked if I wanted to preach something, there was actually a topic in my heart that God has been speaking to me a while, and I thought, why don't I share that? And that is to say that all of us can preach, and all of us have wonderful insights and lessons that we learn throughout life that we can also share with other people. So yeah, and it actually kind of fits into what I'm going to talk about, which is artists of the kingdom. So like I said, there's this thing in my heart, which is God has been speaking to me for a long while, which is about art. Ever since I was a kid, I've always been doing like piano lessons, guitar lessons, singing. I like drawing. My mom, she studied arts education, and so like it's in the blood in a way, in the sense that like art has always been a part of my life, and I really enjoy it. I sang in choirs like for 20 years continuously. There's even some pictures of this moment. So that's me in choir. I don't know if you can see me. I'm the one with the shorts right there in the front. Yeah. Oh, wait. There we go. That's me in high school singing in choir. And then I would also do like plays and stuff like that. And then I told you the story, right, in the children's story that I messed up. That's the picture in the left. And for some reason, they typecast me as always like the wise king, because that other one's in college, and I'm doing the same thing. Yeah, so art's kind of always been in my life. And also, when I was around the age of 11, I did a short film for school that we had to do, and I just fell in love with that. And so I was like, you know what? This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to make videos. I want to, talk about God through these things. And so I was like, yeah, art is definitely my thing. But then the question kind of came to me like, okay, if I'm going to work with that, and if I'm going to, do videos and stuff like that, then what consists, good art, right? Because we learn in our life that, there's good things and bad things. And so I was like, okay, what is good art and what is bad art? And that kind of just stayed in my mind all around. Because like I said, I would sing in choirs and stuff like that. But then some other things, like in my community, in the communities that I grew up, they kind of like were frowned upon. So like, for example, movies, even though that's something that I wanted to do, there was a lot of people that would say, oh, movies are bad. Or some types of movie are bad, or like, for example, video games, they turn your brain into mush, or like comic books, are they really good? They're poor in quality. And so I was always with this idea, okay, so there's got to be something that is good, and there's got to be something that is bad. And if I want to do something that, is for God, I got to do what's good. And that question of what is good art or what is art always stuck in my mind. And as I grew up, I went to look, what that was. And there was a clash of definitions, because some people would tell me like, well, it's if you're really a really good artist, you're like a master of the skill. So like in my case, like I would have to make videos that are really well filmed, really well edited, or if you're a painter, you have to master the strokes of the brush. And so it comes to this technical point, right? Some other people would say, no, what true art is when you express yourself, and there's that, authentic content. So, and that sometimes made sense to me, because I would see like even Christian movies, and then the stories were just a little bit weird, or it felt like lacked something, weren't. And so I was like, okay, that makes sense too. But then there wasn't something clear. And as I grew on, like I saw, okay, the technical aspect of it doesn't, you can have a great painting, you can have a great song, you can have a great movie, and it's still not good. And the same way that you can have great content, also some like people can say that it's not good as well. And so I was a little bit confused. And because honestly, we can look at these three pictures, and we can ask ourselves, what of these are art, right? Some can say like the first one is art because it's very, well drawn. Some can say that the second one is art because it expresses something, although I don't know what it is. The third one, somebody can say, well, it's not art because it's a kid's drawing. And by the way, that's Catherine's drawing. She drew that in my notebook when she was little. And so that for me is art because it's special, It's so what is art? The question is still there, like what is the definition? Ultimately, I thought about that, if I believe in God and if I believe in the Bible, and I want to work for Him, then the best place to look for a definition of art is in the Bible itself, right? So that's what I went to do, and that has been the journey of my life since 11 years old. And to this day, I'm still searching and trying to learn a little bit more about that. And that is what I want to talk about today, art in the Bible, and share a little bit with you guys. Now, some of you might already know this, some might not, but, if there's somebody that does learn something, then that's good. It's positive. So the first thing that you would do if you would seek to understand what the Bible talks about art is try to find out where the places where God talks about art, or the writers of the Bible talk about art, right? Or we see the word art and its derivatives, right? So if you look into the New King James Version, you see artist or artistic or artisan 15 times. In the New International Version, you see 11. And in the New American Standard Bible, you see it 15 times, which is not a lot. You would guess that, within 66 books, you would have a lot more of this word coming up. But it doesn't. But at the same time, it's, so these are the words that come up. So like Oman, Macha, Shabbat, and some others, which, it translates to artist, ingenious work, framing, artistic design, and in Greek, techne, which is art, skill, trade, and craft. And all these words kind of, give us that basic definition of art, which is like the skill set, right? Somebody that knows how to do something really well, that is a master of his craft, and the craft that comes from his hand. So But at the same time, translations are contextual. So a lot of the people that translate the Bible, they're using definitions that they're used to in their own time. So if we really want to understand what the Bible talks about art, we have to do an exegesis where we go and try to understand the Bible in its real intention. Obviously, I'm not a theologian and not a Hebrew scholar either, so, but I've done a lot of research, so. And the interesting thing is, like, okay, so where do we start? I think the best point for us to start is at the beginning of the book, right? A lot of scholars talk about how the 3 first chapters of Genesis are the blueprint for the rest of the Bible. And it's really rich. So it would make sense for us to go all the way back. And so when we have the first verse of the Bible, which is in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, we already see something that is very interesting. You know, God has a lot of names in the Bible, right? Prince of Peace, Lion of Judah, and so on, right? And God could have used any way to describe himself in the beginning, in the first verse of the Bible. And it's interesting that God chose to show his creative side. And that shows us something that is important to his essence. He's a creator in essence, right? And so in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And so that word that translates to beginning, which is bara, means to shape and create. This is a word that is only, well, not only, but most of the time used only for God himself. And so it kind of puts him in that special place, like of a supreme creator of sorts, right? So, right, in the beginning, we already see that God is a creator, and that tells us something. And we're going to look more into that. And so we go to verse 2, and it says, "Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters." It doesn't really talk about creation or art in itself or explicitly, but when we look into some words that are used here, for example, tohu and bohu, which is translated as formless and empty, the use of that it gives, it's kind of like an empty canvas of sort, right? So the world was there and it had nothing. It was in blank. And so God, the creator, comes to this place and sees this earth with a blank canvas for him to work on. And then something else that is interesting in this verse is the word ruach, which is for spirit, right? The spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And so this term, which is used in many other places, the Spirit of God is used only a little bit later again. And it's interesting, I'm going to come back to that later on. But the idea that the Spirit of God was there is interesting because he is active. And the word that he uses later on to use as hovering is flutter, move, and shake. Which is one of our scholars of the church, which Angel Rodriguez, he talks about how this word is to say that he was active, he was there, he was working in the place. Later on, when we see the next time we see the word Spirit of God or the term Spirit of God, Ruach Elohim, is actually in Exodus 31 when God is talking to Moses and saying, "Look, see, I have called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Ur, of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom, in understanding, in knowledge, and in all kinds of craftsmanship." And so, again, the Spirit of God is coming again in this very specific moment of artistic design. So to say that the Spirit of God is always before the actual realization of art, of artistic, endeavors. Um, and so we go to the verse 3, and then we have, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. Now, when we talk about artistic endeavors, like we saw in the usage of art, the word art in the Bible, it's always connected to the craft, right? Like if you're a master of the skill. But then here it's very interesting because the way that God does this, the way that God creates things is through saying. And that shows us that there is an expression there. God, not only God is good at his craft, but he is also expressing himself, And so we do have also this idea where we of art as being something expressive of something, exactly, coming from within, from the essence of yourself. And so God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from darkness. And then we have the word good, which is good. So the translation works out. But it also means pleasant, agreeable, appropriate. It's not only in the sense of morality, in the sense of like something is good or evil, but also in the sense that it's pleasant to the senses. It's also agreeable, appropriate. And so when we read these 4 verses, we understand some of the things about God. We know that he is active, he's a creator, an artist, he's self-expressive, and all that he creates is good. So we know that to be an artist is something good, and not just something good, but it's also one of the main things about God, because he chooses to show himself like that in the first verse of the Bible. Okay, but what does that have to do with me, right? We're talking about God here. God is everything, and I'm down here. And so how does this apply to me? Let's continue reading. So we know the story. He creates all of the earth in 6 days. And then on the 6th day as well, he goes and says, then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea, and the birds in the skies, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. And we see that the Bible uses the word tselem, which is an image, and this word image is not only image in the sense of similarity, but it's also in the use of representative, in the sense that the same word is used in other places, such as in Isaiah, to talk about the images of pagans, or so there's this idea of representation of something, right? The other word that he uses is demuth, which is likeness and similitude, and then in that sense, it's talking about how we are similar to God, and that's important later on. So keep that in mind. And then we read in verse 7, then the Lord God formed the man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Again, there's this sense of artistry, of sculpturing, to form, to fashion. And this, again, is this same verb, yatsar, is used in other places to talk about pottery. And so we have this idea of God, of a craftsman, like molding man off the ground. And it's interesting, again, because we have the word for man, Hadam, and then that becomes the name of also Adam. and its similarity to Hadamah, which is ground and land. So we have this identification with the creation. This is sort of putting us in the place of creation under God, the Creator, right? And so later on, we also have now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds in the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them, and whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So after God created man, God gave him all the earth to take care of, and the first assignment that he has was to name the animals. Now, the verb ikra is to call, to proclaim, to read, and there's actually an interesting quote from this guy called Makoto Fujimura, and he talks about artistry and the Bible, and he says that we can create into creation something unique and particular. Thus, in Genesis 2, we see Adam's first act of creativity, naming the animals. So, what do we understand about humankind? That we are works of art, but we are also artists in the sense because we are the image of God, both in similitude, but also as representatives, as an image. We are also artists because we are representing Him. We are the self-expression of God, so we are a creation of Him. But at the same time, we can also be self-expressive proportionally. We are creating within the creation. God gives us the animals to name, and gives us the world the earth, so that we can work on it. So we are also artists, not just the work of art, but in a proportionate, way. Okay, cool. So now we know about the artist, we know about art, but is there a distinction about what is good art and bad art? That was the question that I was thinking when I was really young, and to this day, I still think about it, right? Let's continue reading the verse, the 3 chapters. So God creates man and woman, and just a point here, God also creates the woman out of creation, right? He creates it out of the rib of the man, and she is also given the demand to work and to be creative as well. So that's just another point to highlight. But as we continue, like they're in the garden, they're doing their thing, and at one point, God told Adam, "Look, I have all these trees, you have all of these of these fruits that you can eat, but you cannot eat from one fruit, which is the fruit of the tree of the good and evil." And so Adam's like, cool. But then Eve goes close to the tree and sees the tree. And it's interesting because then in Genesis 3:6, it says, "When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it." And then that's kind of intriguing because we see that the same word that God uses to say that everything is good, that is perfect, that it's wholesome, it's also used to say that the tree that was prohibited, the fruit of it was good. It was good for food. And it wasn't just good for food, it was also tava, a desire. It was pleasant to the senses. It was pleasing to the eye. It was desirable. And so when we stop to think about this, it doesn't make sense. If God created everything, and everything that God creates is good, why? And also the tree, as we can see, like the tree is good, the fruit looks good. Why is it bad that the person eats this creation or has this experience with this creation of God? It's kind of mind-boggling. And what it kind of shows us that even good things can be bad. In the same way, in some way, when we look further on in Genesis 3:21, because they eat and now they have to deal with the fallen nature of man, and they feel naked. God makes garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothes them. And so it's the same. The verb asa is to make, and it's the same. It gives the same connotation of creation, craftsmanship, and everything else. So again, God is being the creator in a way, but now he's making it out of skin. So there's death, there's ugliness. In a way, if everything that God does is good, then is he saying that killing animals or bringing death, is that good? So there's this weird apparent contradiction between everything that is perfect, right, in the creation of the 7 days, and then now we have something that is good, that is bad, but we have something that is bad, but is also good. And what is actually behind all of this? So to kind of understand this, we have to go a little bit back. So going back to the order that God says to Adam, which is in Genesis 2:16, it says, "And the Lord God commanded the man, 'You are free to eat from any tree in the garden.'" And then he says, "But not from the tree of good and evil." And this verb, tzava, which is to give charge, command, and order, is also a way of expression. So we know what we see is that everything that God expresses, that is what is good. So in the creation, he creates man creates the earth through the word, his word. And it's interesting to point out that we talk about how God creates man, forming, and it's very like personal and active. But before that, he also utters. He says, God says, "Let's make man in our image." So before even creating, he's also saying it. He's also using the same word that he uses to create the earth. So everything that God says, everything that he expresses, that is what is good. In this place, what we see is God's commanding him not to eat. And so we have, there's a verse in Isaiah 45:12. Let me see if I put this here. Okay, yeah. Isaiah 45:12 that says, "I have made the earth and created man on it." So talking about his creation and how everything, is good. "My hands stretched out the heavens, and all their hosts I have commanded." So at the same time he's talking about creating, he's also talking about the expressing, the commanding. So everything that he expresses, that is what is good. And then, all right, I got to get a sip of water here. Yeah. So he has this expression, which is what defines what is good. And going back to what we learned about the expression of God, we are his self-expression, right? And all of his creation is his self-expression. So by self-expressing, when we are given the activity to express ourselves representing God, we express back in accordance to him. Now, as humans and being special in the way that we are made in the image of God, we do have free will. So we do have the choice to express back in accordance to his expression or not. And then we see that, for example, in Psalms 19:1, where it says, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands." So creation is declaring God's, testifying to God. We also see this later on in Philippians 2:10, 11, where it says, I think yeah, in Philippians 10, 2, 10, 11, where it says that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under and, on, and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So again, here it's interesting because, yeah, I had the verses here. It's interesting because not only is he talking about the people that are chosen and that are not chosen, but that are the selected, that are in accordance to his expression, but also everyone in heaven and under the earth. And this term "under the earth" it means even those that are sinners. In the end, they will recognize the Lord and say that he is just. And so we see that all of his creation, in one way or another, we testify of him. And even if our own decision is to not stay in accordance to his expression and express that back, even then, in the end, there will be this testimony, this glorification of God through our understanding that God is just and God is love. And kind of echoing Philippians 2, 10, 11, and also Revelation 22, Ellen White talks about in her last paragraph that the great controversy is ended. Sins and sinners are no more. The entire universe is clean. One pulse of harmony and gladness beats through the vast creation. From him who created all flow life and light and gladness. Throughout the realms of illimitable space, from the minutest atom to the greatest world, all things, animate and inanimate, in their unshadowed beauty and perfect joy declare that God is love. Again, saying that all of his creation, which includes nature, which includes animals, which includes us, in our own way will testify to God's greatness, whether we like it or not. So what do we understand of the nature of art? Art expresses back, and as humans, we can attempt to not express back, but ultimately we understand that we will. And it testifies of God. So we're giving back and at the same time testifying of God. So what are some examples of art in the Bible? We have, for example, Exodus 31, right? 1-5, which I talked about, which is Bezalel is given the Holy Spirit, and through that he creates the sanctuary through God's guidelines. Psalms 105, where David is proclaiming his love and adoration to God in a joyful way. Psalms in general, Psalm 6, which is opposite because he's talking about his sorrow, right? How he feels that he's been left. And again, like the same thing about the skin, we can look at that and say, well, that's not good. But at the same time, he doesn't let that take him down, and he still praises God through it. Hosea, he's an interesting way of seeing art because God uses his own life to show Israel his love for them, and in weird ways, making him marry a prostitute, and so you might think, well, that's just plain weird, but in the end, it does testify to God and his love, and it is representative of his love as well. Job, the same way, he suffers everything in horrible ways, but his life is a testimony. His life is artistic in the sense that it expresses back praise to God and represents God. Even if we look, stop to think about it, Judas's life was also artistic in that sense because it does express God's love. It does in a way, even if it is tragic because of his own choices. The Song of Songs, which is a story about love, and sometimes we don't think about this stuff. Like love is artistic. Love expresses God. And so the question is, what is art in a biblical sense? Everything is art because we are his creation. And so we express God. And going back to what we said before, we are works of art, but we ourselves, because we are representative of Christ, we are also artists ourselves. And that kind of goes back to that verse, and it kind of makes more sense when we read the verse of 1 Corinthians 10:31, which says, "So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God." Because it's not only about speaking up here in the front, doing a good speech, which I know I'm doing terribly at. So, but it's not about the speech; it's about the content. So it's not only about the speech. It's not only about the video. It's not only about the programs that we do in the church. It's about everything. It's about our lives in general. Because ultimately, we ourselves are works of art. We tend to say that life imitates art or art imitates life, but that's not true because art is life and life is art. And so it does make much more sense when we think about it, and that kind of puts us also in that idea of being a little bit more humble about these things. It's very interesting. There's this rabbi, which I think he writes really well about this, which is Abraham J. Heschel, and he talks about, and he says that it is the sense of the sublime that we have to regard as the root of man's creative activities in art, thought, and noble living. So not just art itself, but also living. Only those who live on borrowed words believe in their gift of expression. Because ultimately, whatever we do, whether we play the piano right, whether we play one of the wise men's in our choir as a kid, we're doing this not for ourselves. We're not doing this because we're good. We're doing this because we were created in an image, and because of that, we are gifted these things, and we do it for his glory. We live on borrowed words. They are not our own. And so that goes back to the idea of God forming us. We are being molded and being guided through his hand, which is what Isaiah 64:8 says. Yet you, Lord, are our Father. We are the clay. You are the potter. We are all the work of your hand. And he continues to work on us. And so going back to the idea of the nature of art and what is art, everything is art. And we have the choice to express back artistically. And when I say artistically, I don't mean like painting. I mean, if you're working as a secretary, doing your chores, or even at home as, a son or a mother or whatever you're doing. All of these things are art. And it's weird to say because we think about art in a very specific way in our day-to-day, right? But when we start to think about art as everything, we start to appreciate life more and see the beauty of life more. Because in the beginning, God created earth, not just because it was morally good, but it was pleasant. Life is supposed to be pleasant. And so the idea here is that understanding this, we're compelled, to glorify his name, as we read it in Philippians, right? And my appeal to all of you today is to, whether you are somebody that works with a specific artistic medium or not, in the general term that we use, artistic, or if you're not, you're doing something else, or in our day-to-day, that we be both the work of art representing and also testifying of God, but also that we do our things in a way that glorifies God, that we choose to express back to God his glory. So it's something simple, but it's been very very important to me, and I hope it can also add to your life as well.